Oh, okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, baseball fans. Back from my one-week excursion to Cooperstown, I'm Bruce McClure, and I'd like to welcome all of you to another meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR, always held in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, here's a question for you. How did an insurance salesman and a high school principal turn a down-and-out team into one of the major league's greatest dynasties? They didn't do it with money like those guys in the Bronx. And they didn't do it with sabermetrics, which makes for good movies, but not World Series titles. And they certainly didn't do it with the help of the baseball establishment, which fought them every step of the way. Finley Ball, how two baseball outsiders turned the Oakland A's into a dynasty and changed the game forever, is the story of those two outsiders. Charlie Finley, the A's maddeningly unconventional owner, and Carl, his cousin and right-hand man, who found themselves part of the ultimate insiders club. Against all odds, they built one of the best teams ever to take the field and might have saved Major League Baseball in the process. Telling the family side of the story, Carl's daughter, Nancy, offers an unvarnished and often hilarious front office account of her Uncle Charlie's 20-year reign as baseball's enfant terrible. It gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome and introduce to all of you a member of baseball royalty, an author, a new SABR member, and my good friend, Nancy Finley. Nancy,
Thank you.
Welcome to Northern New England, my friend. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
You have no idea how excited I am to see you.
Oh, I'm so excited to see you. I'm your biggest fan.
Oh my gosh. You have low standards, my friend.
Oh my God, you're funny. You're funny. No, I just I have to pinch myself when I think about what we accomplished, because to me, during those years, it was like a big family reunion. Every year, oh, if we win, then I'll get to see the family. So it was. I remember I helped with ticket sales because we had the World Series ticket sales in a private location. We did not have them in the Coliseum. So I never stopped to ask if other teams did it that way. But we would have a vacant bank, or we would have a place would be given to us, and people would look suspiciously, wondering what we were doing, going in and out. But I do remember, I think I've said this, I remember I would help open the mail. Every morning we would pick it up at the Oakland post office. Monty Moore would give the address during the games, and bags and bags of mail. And I opened an envelope once from Boz Scaggs. That had to be the Bob Scaggs. It had to be. I remember staring at it and thinking, is this really him? Because his music was on the radio all the time. And it just, everyone had to go that route to get tickets. So it was something really special, but we worked from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. And thank goodness we had a lot of restaurants who would give us meals at the end of the day. I remember just walking in and falling into a booth. And then it was the same the next day, but it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting. And I think I learned to work fast from that. I could do in 4 hours what it took a lot of people to do in 8 hours.
Tell us about some of that fun that was happening behind the scenes, so to speak, in the years that your Uncle Charlie owned the team. What was it like when they were away from the cameras and the press and those bright lights on them?
It was real. I thought it was the same. I just remember what caught my attention was during the playoff and World Series, where we walked in, there were vans parked with huge cords. These must have been the nationwide cable companies, and they were real noisy because this was where we parked, and it was just unusual to see. I knew that these stations weren't normally there, but aside from that, I don't think we acted any differently if if the cameras were on, except I know that Charlie wanted to do a lot of the talking. And I realized that no one in our family wrote books. It wasn't something you did. You were supposed to keep things to the family. And I don't really understand what was behind that, because I think that led to a lot of the incorrect information that's out there now.
That's an interesting point right there that I was actually going to try to tackle a little bit later as we went on, but I'm going to springboard off of that now. You and I have had a lot of conversations on the phone and through email, and our friend Heather is on tonight.
Heather!
See Heather up there? There you go.
Yes, hi. I'll have my A's ring, the women.
Oh, good.
And you've talked about with me the plethora of misinformation that is out there about your Uncle Charlie's tenure as owner of the Oakland A's.
Yes.
Where do you think a lot of this came from, and why do you think it's stuck around even to this day?
I think that what happened was because we didn't talk a lot to the press, except for Charlie, and it's people want something, they need to research too. I'm realizing that people will go back and look at yearbooks or try to find whatever they can to research, and that at the time I don't think that occurred to anyone, that would result in what's said later. I wish it had, but I think back, and I don't think Charlie was never made a proposition of an authorized bio that I know of. I kept thinking one day someone will approach them and it'll be okay. But I don't think Charlie was ready for that. He still had distrust of the press. And
he started out. Go ahead, I'm sorry. He bought the club when they were still in Kansas City. This goes back to, if I recall correctly, 1960.
It was an estate auction in 60. Apparently, Vec told him up in Chicago. Vec told him there was a team for sale. The A's were for sale, and the owner had a sudden heart attack. So Charlie went to the auction. Apparently, no one was expected at that auction. So it was the Kansas City Star reporter or sports writer, and he had a group of businessmen together, and they thought they had the team. And then Charlie walked in.
And the rest is history.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And one of the first things that Charlie did when he took ownership of the Kansas City A's was he made sure that he put an end to the notion and the practice that the club was essentially a 4A club for the Yankees.
Yes.
Those lopsided trades and things like that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I've tried to figure out why they were doing that before Charlie took over.
I've read stories about the owner of the team, and anybody on here when we get to Q&A can correct me if I'm wrong, and it wouldn't be the first time that I was. It's my understanding that the previous owner was in business with the Yankees somehow, might have been a lawyer for the Yankees or something.
Oh, Del Webb and Topping. He had an interest in something with them.
Topping.
Yeah. Okay. He was also a good friend of Ernie Mell, who was the Kansas City sports editor, I guess. He was a bigwig with the Star, and
Okay.
so he paid for the team, and let Mel run it. I never realized that the team was being run out of Mel's Star office.
Ran it out of the newspaper off.
I
Can
know,
you
and
imagine?
a writer of Mel's ended up being the GM.
Yeah,
Park Carroll.
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So time goes on. They've owned the team for a few years, and we start seeing those drafts take place. And
Well,
we
Dad.
start to see Charlie and your dad start to accumulate talent. Now, this is where I got sort of laser focused in your book, because I've always been interested in how your uncle figured out talent. Now, I'm not, the only way I could put it is with certain vernacular. He was not a baseball guy to begin with. He sold insurance.
Right.
Where did he learn that eye for talent?
Well, he had an eye for sales first.
Yes.
My grandfather was the one who said, "You've got to bring Carl in. You've got to bring Carl in." But he was a good salesperson. No 4-year college degree, which always bothered him. And also, he was turned down for the Army.
Oh.
That bothered him. And because of his health, and that's when they discovered he had TB. But with he could just really focus on a person, laser, like you said, but laser focus with his eyes, and just figure someone out. And I always thought that was from his being a good salesman. But he also had a speech impediment, which sort of runs in the family. I had a hard time pronouncing certain words. I had to see a speech therapist. My daughter didn't talk till she was 3. And Charlie had the same speech impediment. He was told to pronounce his words slowly. And that's why people think he spoke odd, but he was trained to do that. And so he was bullied as a child, and he had to go to work with his dad in his dad's steel mill in Gary, Indiana. I'm hearing all of this, and he was real insecure when it came to feeling like he might be taken advantage of with academics or contracts, the way things were written. He knew he wasn't an attorney, and he felt that Dad could look out for him that way. I often see Dad reading the fine print with him, and but he would often speak about the person's movements, mannerisms. He would call people, and his questions, when I hear the questions he asked, I think it's sort of odd, but he was just trying to figure them out. My husband, when we went to dinner the first time, Charlie liked to order for everyone. So Charlie ordered for Morgan, and Morgan didn't want what Charlie ordered. He wanted something else. And that really did not sit well with Charlie. So at the end of dinner, Charlie looked at Morgan and said, "Halibut, that's poor man's food." And Morgan just was enjoying his halibut. He just looked at Charlie. It didn't matter to him. And Charlie passed the test. Morgan passed the test. Charlie never tried to do any digs with Morgan or figure him out. Next time we had dinner, Charlie was great. He was on his best behavior.
Who made all the decisions when it came to grabbing all these players? Now, did your father have much to do with talent analysis, or did all of this fall in Charlie's lap?
It was both. Charlie asked Dad a ton of questions. I would hear Dad on the phone with his ideas. Often Dad said, don't put my name with it. But Dad would say what he liked about something and what he didn't like about something. And Charlie was, he did ask a lot, and there were a lot of brainstorm sessions that I was brought into when I was still a teenager. But after Charlie's divorce, we were all he had. He didn't really make time to get to know other family. So I was brought into the brainstorm sessions, and I remember I felt calm about it because no one could say stupid or that's silly. So I felt like I could say anything that was on my mind. And Charlie liked something I said and made me a VP on the spot. I was 16. And after we drove Charlie to the airport, got back to the stadium, I asked Dad if things were going to change. He said, "You're not a VP." So Dad took it away. Yeah, but Dad, I understand that because Dad didn't want my name in the paper. You saw what happened with Stanley Burrell, AKA Hammer. His name was in the paper. Yeah. Yeah. That was okay. He could go
I love those pictures. I love pictures of him.
Yeah, that was good. He could go in the locker room too. I couldn't.
There's one baseball card, the 75 top set, recounting the A's victory in the 74 World Series, and it looks to me like MC Hammer is in the photograph.
Really?
As a kid. I mean, he's knee high to a grasshopper, and he's in kind of the crowd when they were celebrating a victory. I'd have to go find the baseball card, but I remember it well. There was a discussion online with the SABR baseball card committee about it a little while ago, asking us if it was actually him. I'd have to get it and show you. I'll have to take a picture of it sometime. But
I remember him from 76, mainly 76, because he hung around and would ask Dad constantly. Dad would park near the Coliseum up on a hill. And he was always there with his friends and would ask Dad if he could help in any way. So Dad told Charlie about him, and they planned it. When Dad picked Charlie up at the airport, he told Hammer what to do when they drove up. And because Dad needed the help.
I want to ask, and if I'm revealing things too much from the book, tell me. But one of the things that was very interesting about your description of your Uncle Charlie was your theory on why he chose Kelly green, Fort Knox gold, wedding gown white as the colors of the team later on in his tenure in Kansas City. And I know a lot of the players that played in Kansas City at the time didn't want to be seen in these uniforms.
Yes.
But you had a very interesting passage, part of your book, that discussed why you thought Charlie did that. Could you talk about that for a minute?
It's something called synesthesia. I happen to have a book from about 25 years ago where it has that under mental conditions. It wasn't, I mean, you wouldn't want to be in that book, but later on, it's seen as a phenomena of people who have a high IQ, but they're seen as a little quirky. But what happened was I went in the back door in a way because my daughter was 10 and she seemed really bothered by seeing colors in her mind. She didn't like it. And she asked me if that ever happened to me. So I Googled it, and this is what came up. And we were referred to a doctor who referred us to a psychiatrist who was looking into this. And he diagnosed Taylor with synesthesia, and he said it skips generations, but there's a good chance someone in your family has had it or has it. So I started looking at everyone in the family except Charlie. Why would I? I mean, I was looking more at my mom's family and asking questions. A lot of people who have it don't even know it. Some people wouldn't want to say they have it. And then Taylor didn't want me to talk about it because she was worried it would make her look different. But I found this poetry she wrote when she was sick and had to stay home from school. And one of it was about the color orange. I never knew she wrote that. I could not write poetry, but she would. She was very prolific with language, and teachers would hold her papers up and say, "This is how your paper should look." So what happened was I was looking around our house, and all of a sudden it occurred to me: green baseball bats, orange baseballs, yellow, and I thought, of course. Charlie had to have color, and the colors became deeper with every win. And
Go ahead.
it was as if once he had the money and could make his money, then he could do what he wanted. And that article from June 61 in Sports Illustrated is a really good source. I would say that is a very good article, just to repeat, because it talks about the colors Charlie had the stadium painted. And my mom thought that was odd. And it is. If you look at the fluorescent pink, the gold, why? Aquamarine. So
you go into great detail in the book about the colors that he painted Municipal Stadium in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And he was always he was mostly referred to as one of baseball's greatest showmen. His name's frequently mentioned in the same sentence as Bill Veeck.
I've seen that, yes.
He has been credited with so many different innovations that he floated over the years. Some of them were his own, some of them were not quite his own, for lack of a better term, like the pitch timer.
Right. Yeah.
Now, we discussed that in an email. He put a clock up in center field in Municipal Stadium, if I remember us discussing that correctly, right?
I've heard about that. I never thought about that much, because I've heard that it didn't make much of a difference.
Right, because the rule really never was enforced from the second that it was put on the books in the late 50s. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 56, 57, somewhere in there. But
yeah,
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. But he had, I mean, if I recall correctly, he was one of the first in the 60s to propose the designated hitter.
I have heard. I remember the Champaign opening on January 1st, 73. I heard it.
Glenn had his hand up there. Glenn.
Yeah, I believe that in one of his books, Bill Veeck mentions that his father had floated the idea of a designated hitter when he was the president of the Chicago Cubs, when he was the general manager of the Chicago Cubs. And so the idea had been around for a while, but it hadn't, I think Charlie Finley helped push it to fruition. Because the time finally had become ripe for it.
I've always said, you know, I've heard a lot of people say they don't like it, and then I hear that now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to keep it. So, but
it's universal. They call it universal now, Nancy.
I know.
Now, so we talk about his innovation. He discussed the designated hitter at length in the 60s. I know that. And I know that the designated hitters idea goes all the way back to another athletic, another member of the A's, Connie Mack.
Yes.
Orange baseballs that I have seen on eBay go for an awful lot of money.
That's good. I hope it keeps going up, but I just remember all the hate talk about it. We had boxes of those underneath the Coliseum, and people just made fun of it. So I'm just thinking, well, I don't know. I don't know how many people really do like that. I mean, even at this time, but I adopted neon orange, or it's Caltrans orange, I think, as our sub color. I asked my daughter, I'll always ask my daughter what she thinks of it. And she loves to talk about it. She'll ask me what Charlie did. She sees, and she'll say, I get that. And I don't know what she's seeing in her mind, but she sees his colors and says she knows what he's thinking. And it's really interesting. I really wish people could get a room of cynics together, that they're called, and just see them talk. Color, it's another language.
That's very interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look, do a little bit of research on that. That's very interesting to hear.
Yes, number one is always white with her. I know that.
Huh.
Getting back to that pitch clock, I believe that Finley, when he did that, it backfired on him because the only time it was called was against his own club.
Yes.
That's a sticky situation. So it backfired. I heard it wasn't a good outcome, but something needs to be done. I mean, imagine having a double header and being tied in the last series or the game, and you're starving, or you have some place you have to be. So, I mean, it's tough. It's really tough. I was hoping they would speed it up some way.
Let's talk about that dynasty.
Oh, yeah.
72, 73, 74. They won the big one 3 in a row. And you were there for all of it.
I remember 74 really well. 5 out of 7? Yes. Yeah, that was.
What memories can you share that we didn't see on camera, we don't see in the World Series film, the highlights, things like that? What do you remember about that, just on a personal standpoint, being inside the organization at the time?
I remember right after the World Series in 73, Oakland's superintendent of schools was assassinated.
Ooh.
And the SLA did it. That they're the ones who kidnapped Patty Hearst.
Yes.
And Dad said that they were looking for Charlie and couldn't find him. That's so typical. I know Dad used to say, don't leave at the same time every day and get home. I mean, my granddad and Dad, they were always watching out, telling people not to have a set routine. And I never understood what they meant. But I guess that's an example. So Dad was told he should leave me out of school for the rest of the year, which was fun. Dad always said we would homeschool, and we would go to museums like the Rosicrucian. There was a museum in San Jose that looked Egyptian, and no one really knew about it, but it was just really interesting. So we would visit these places, and I stayed out of school until the first week of January, 74. So that really stands out, knowing all this drama that happened and the shooting. And then Dad always seemed to stay in touch with the FBI. They had a cousin who was with the Dallas, Texas FBI. So that was a good source.
Were those ball clubs, did they really fight the way it was told in the press?
Yes, they did. But they were like brothers. They were like brothers. Now, my husband, the way he grew up is they were polite to each other. 3 boys. And I tell him, that's not right. Something's wrong about your family. What our players did is what brothers do: make a face, make a comment, push someone's button. Yeah, they did that.
It's purported that what I remember when I was a kid and reading about the A's in the paper with my father or watching it on TV, we didn't have ESPN and MLB Network and all the highlights that we have now. But what I heard a lot of was this was, 24 guys that won in spite of the fact that they couldn't stand to be in the same room with each other.
I don't think they disliked each other like that much. I really don't think they did. I see how they interact with each other. And I went to the private thing for Catfish after his diagnosis. And it was before a press conference. So we were in a room alone with him. And there wasn't a dry eye. They just really loved each other. And then he died 6 weeks later. So I was happy they had that for him.
So
And I saw, yeah, they were
Hertford.
Yeah, I saw how they were standing around Dad. I saw Dad holding an orange baseball. And I remember Catfish couldn't use his hands. Those were the first to go. And he seemed like he really wanted to autograph a baseball for my son's friend. And we kept saying, it's okay, we don't expect that. Just a genuinely nice person.
This was down in Hertford, correct?
No, well, where he lived. No, this was done at the Oakland Coliseum.
Oh, okay.
Right after his diagnosis. And I remember Dad would be called, and Dad would call my cousins to tell them this was happening, whoever wants to come. But I took my son, who was 8, and he brought a friend. But I remember he was just really touched. Joe Rudy remembered my son when we were at the A's event 2 weeks ago. He remembered Morgan Jr.
I want to touch on that A's event a little bit earlier because we were talking about that on the phone before we started our Zoom tonight. But we get to 75 and they lose the American League Championship Series to the Boston Red Sox. Dixie was very, very happy about that, being a huge Red Sox fan with his Boston Beaneater shirt here and whatnot. Now he's shaking his head.
Hey, I opened the mail to selling the playoff tickets, and they were not nice. Oh, Red Sox fans were not nice with their language.
There's a lot of them in this room, Nan.
Oh, well, they could have been a little nicer about that. But I mean, I remember X-rated ads would drop out of the envelope and I would just throw it away. But yes, that hit hard because Charlie was getting very dependent on us. His divorce had happened. He did ask some of his kids to join him in Boston. But I hear that I have pictures from that. And it just, of course, no one's happy. But our players seemed really mentally beat up when they returned.
Wow, that's well. Bob LeBoy just put up in the chat. We had to get to know.
Yeah, well, hey, they made it that far. They made it. In fact, I remember that because I was at when Charlie came to Oakland for the photo shoot for Time Magazine, is when he brought a date. And it was his very first date after his divorce. I cannot wait to see what she looked like.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's in that picture by SABR that says Dynasty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 76 comes along. They finish in second in the West, if I remember correctly. The beginning of the end, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
And your uncle sells the team in 1980, if I'm right.
No, Dad talked him into it. It was we had an offer from Marvin Davis in Denver. In 77 was a really bad year. But a lot of things happened. Our mule died at the end of 76. That was a big marketing a piece. I mean, the mule, people would come to the game early just to have a chance to pet the mule. So that was hard. That was hard. And then, so our mule dies, and then Charlie's divorced, but he just had his trial with Bowie Kuhn in Chicago. Free agency's in, but Charlie had a proposal for free agency. And I used to hear him talk to Dad about why they thought the other owners didn't come in with their own proposals and meet over it and talk about what might be the best, because it sounds like they just went with what was put on the table. So Charlie couldn't understand that, why they didn't come up with other scenarios. So then we had that come in, and then we had to start over. The Denver, Marvin Davis offered to buy us a house, car allowance, a lot of good things if we went to Denver. That sounded good, and then Oakland stopped it. I remember Oakland said they wouldn't negotiate to cut the lease short. So that was over in a month. And so Dad said we had to rebuild. That's all we could do, is rebuild, hope to have a repeat of the 70s. And then if the team sells, we could have a higher amount. So that's what we were doing. I remember when Tony Armas came in, I liked him a lot. And then as 78 went on, then we had 79, I remember 79, fond memories because of Ricky Henderson, Brian Kingman. I was fond of Mickey Klutz. I know not many people remember him. I liked him. And then all of a sudden we're served with a lawsuit. I mean, it was like we were starting to get hot, and then we're served. So the lawsuit said that the team's roster wasn't up to MLB standards. And I remember Dad went to SMU, School of Law, and was talking about that cause of action, but they had their law firm do a summary judgment motion, and it was just thrown out the same year in July. And I remember hearing the term frivolous. So, but Dad was told by his law enforcement friends that we could be in trouble through violence, local violence, because the press said a lot of bad things about us. And what if a fan thought that it was okay to do something to us? Charlie wasn't there. We were the only ones named Finley in the Bay Area. So Dad was worried about me.
Can't blame him.
Yeah, so he talked Charlie into selling the team, and it took a lot of working on Charlie. Dad knew how to. Oh, what? I'm hearing my echo.
You're okay.
Okay, so Dad talked Charlie into it, but Dad was always worried that Charlie might change his mind or try to sabotage it. So Dad's goal was to negotiate for Billy Martin at the 79 owner meeting. Charlie gave Dad his proxy and didn't want to attend those meetings. So Dad attended the meeting solo. I remember in 79, 78, and they liked him. I guess Charlie was protesting, but it turned out the owners liked it. So Dad arranged it, and Billy was coming to Oakland. I remember Dad calling me from his hotel room, and it just sounded really great. I was excited. Everyone was excited. Walt Jocketty joined us in our minor league department. Mickey Morabito was coming in with Billy. It was going to just be a really good group. And then I remember Dad had a good friend, Cornell Meyer, who was CEO of Kaiser Aluminum in Oakland. And Charlie didn't know Mr. Meyer, but Dad did. And Dad asked him if he knew of any businesses who might be interested, and he did. I know Dad never thought he would score that quick. So yeah. It happened so fast. I remember Mount St. Helens went off. All this stuff reminds me, Mount St. Helens, and took the press off of us, but we wanted it then. And so Dad was telling me about the prospective owners, and they would come out and we'd socialize. It takes a while to sell a team, even when you have someone who has the money. It took until November of '80. And then Dad was asked to stay in his executive position as a guide, but Charlie wasn't. Charlie wanted to be a consultant, and they never asked him.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So, we of course the A's go on, they win some World Series. Eck gives up that home run to what's that?
The
That's
playoff
right.
he won. Those were our scouting guides. Wow.
And they picked up Eck. He gave up that home run to Kirk Gibson years
Wasn't
ago.
that the later 80s?
That was later. Yeah, now we're moving along. But now we're here. It's 2023. We've watched this in Oakland now for the better part. I'm going to go out on a limb, 10, 12, 15 years. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. They've had some ups and downs, but the lows have been real low. And for the past few years, they've stayed very low.
Yeah.
And we've all heard the stories about the problems with the Oakland Coliseum, the 2021 fire sale Ben just mentioned. We've all heard the problems with the Oakland Coliseum and the other professional teams moving out of Oakland for whatever reason it could be. I'm gonna full disclosure, I've never been to Oakland. But my question is this: at this juncture now, we're at May 1st, 2023. Do you believe that Oakland is still a viable major league city and that this club should remain in Oakland? Or what do you see, Nancy, as the future of your beloved franchise?
Well, Oakland, the Coliseum, the way it is now, it's too large. It's far. I mean, they added those suites for Al Davis. I remember before, yes, the seating was around 50,000 before that was added. And it blocks the view. I mean, it's, I've never liked that. So they add the extra seats. I've always wondered how they thought they could sell, how they can fill that Coliseum up the way they're supposed to have so many games at home. I like what the Giants did.
It's a nice ballpark.
Right. But it's by the water.
Yep.
And that's what sets Oakland apart, is being by the water, not landlocked. So Oakland's lucky that it has a team named after it. I've heard that. Well, Dad said that in Kansas City, when the Star put a rumor out that Charlie wanted to move, it wasn't true, but he was angry when he heard the Chiefs were paying $1 a year. So he would say, well, they don't treat me right, I'm going to move. And that would just, that wouldn't work out. So that rumor was out, and Oakland started calling the office all the time. Dad said it was really annoying. And so I guess he said they believed what was in the paper. And the contract between Dad and Charlie was that Dad would live wherever the team was based. So Dad had to want to live where they moved. And Oakland was not planned. We were
Oh,
not planned. Not planned at all. What happened was that if we had to move, it was going to be Dallas, Fort Worth. That was tough. And Charlie knew that. Charlie had lived with my grandfather and dad, and he sent his kids to stay with us when they started college. He liked that area. And Dad said that when the lease was up in 67, 68, they went in for a meeting thinking things would be normal, and they left figuring they had to move. They didn't have a choice. The amount was raised to an amount they could not afford. So Dad remembered Oakland saying that their Coliseum was in a turnkey situation. You just have to move in, everything's already done. No Coliseum to build. This is what Dad heard. So, and they'd gone out there to see the Coliseum. And so Dad said he hated moving. I always wondered what it was, but he had to arrange a lot of that. And so it was tough on him, I could tell. So he arranged the move. It was late 67. And when they got there, the front office wasn't done. It looked like subflooring. And they were promised that it would be, and it never was. But Charlie never wanted to pay his own money because he put $500,000 into the Coliseums, Kansas City. And so he wouldn't do that again. But the Oakland thing, it always felt temporary, even to me. When I went out to live with Dad, I just remember cinder blocks everywhere. And it didn't seem like it was the same party atmosphere. Kansas City, I could tell that everyone loved being there. It was great. But Oakland seemed temporary. And then look what happened with the team. We just blew up. Because Dad told me, he said, we have new players, Vida Blue and Reggie Jackson. And I helped organize Vida's fan mail in 71.
Oh.
Yeah, after school. So it was a different feeling. So Oakland just had this temporary feel, and then we start winning. In fact, Dad had really good friends in Kansas City, and everyone still seemed shell-shocked about having to move at the last minute. So I've been through, this whole thing, I looked and saw where the reason I got our mascot's remains is because the A's said they were going to move in a month. This was 2009. And I didn't want to think of the remains sitting there at the SPCA next to the Coliseum. So I said, I want those. So, and I'm thinking, okay, that was one time when the move seemed like it was really going to happen 100%.
Where were they headed?
San Jose or Fremont.
Okay, that's right. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Yes. And that went on and on and on. But since when the team was sold in 95, the Haas family sold it to Schott and Hoffman, there hasn't been an outright sale since. It feels like there has, but there hasn't. It hasn't been changed hands like that.
Yeah, it's just they've just kind of tread water, and here we are today.
Well, yes, and I never know really who's the owner. It's like percentages are bought and sold, but they stay sort of the same. The corporation does, but and I know that the commissioner's office has never liked Oakland. Never. I've never heard them say anything good about it.
Now you were jumping, but when I get to Q&A in just a minute, I'm going to go have one more question I want to ask. You were just out in Oakland. You were at the was the 73 World Series champion reunion, right?
Yes, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. How was that?
Oh gosh, it was great to see our players. I don't want anything else to happen physically. I want them to just stay the way they are, take care of your health. Yes, it was great though. I got to see Vida. I found out Gene Tennis likes the same type of dog I do, and the Akita. I don't meet many people who like Akitas. You know about them. And Joe Rudy, oh God, Ted Kubiak, Carol Fossey, Helen Hunter, Knowles. I met Knowles' wife. Oh, gosh, there was Billy North.
Campaneris, you said.
Oh,
Yeah,
Campy.
Campy was there, right? Yeah.
Campy like family,
Campy.
not like a player. Campy's
Ah,
not.
did Reggie show up?
Yes, my daughter and I got in an elevator with Reggie. We were waiting for the elevator, and the door opens. We go in, and then we're told it's going up and not down because we had to get downstairs to get going. And whoever it was went to the penthouse, and he asked, "What family are you with?" And I told him, but then he got off. So I told Taylor, I think that was Reggie. So I guess he must have driven himself to the stadium, but it was surreal. Then as we're walking out, Vida calls over to us, and he's sitting with Billy North. Oh, Wes Stock, our coach. He was there. He's up in Seattle, his hometown, and his wife, Bev. Gosh, but oh yeah, Campy. We were all huddled on a love seat together in the suite. I mean, it's like, I can't, I talk to his wife nonstop. He is so sweet. He was one of my guys from the early 60s in Kansas City. I called them my guys. Dick Green, Catfish, Campy, and Sal Bando. Sal Bando's sons were there.
This is good stuff. You get a lot of those pictures of those beautiful bright colors on the field in the 70s when baseball was really on television so very often. You didn't have to hunt to find it nowadays. She's got the those are tickets from the old days, right?
Yeah, these were in an envelope, but these would have been our tickets if we needed to use them. And then this was in the hotel. We had to wear this bracelet for the bus ride. And then these were during the dinner the last night.
Terrific.
Yes, my son's girlfriend with blue hair. That's so I wanted to say I have our P&Ls from the very first year if we have time to look. Do you want to take a break and have me go get those?
If we wanted, do we want to move into? Why don't we open it up to questions?
Okay.
Nancy, let's get everybody involved here. This is an opportunity to talk to baseball royalty. I wanted to open it up to questions. Oh, Nancy, you know I'm right. So I'm going to open it up. You can use the raise your hand feature. You can just shout them out. Be my guest. Glenn, go.
Yes, I just wanted to say, since you have never been to the Oakland Coliseum, I just wanted to share my memory. I also was a teenager when they were winning those championships, and I was watching on TV. I was not at the stadium. But I remember the broadcasters talking about the huge battlegrounds in the Coliseum. And I remember how much I liked that made it more of a pitcher's game. And so eventually my son moved to the Bay Area. And when I go to visit him, we frequently will go to an Oakland A's game. And it was a thrill to me to be able to see the stadium that I had been watching as a teenager during those World Series games, and to see that foul territory that they were talking about, and watch the game being played the way I like to see it played. I like to see, I don't like all those pop fouls to go into the stands. I like some of them to be caught so that there's a premium put on hitting the ball there.
that it's nice to walk. One thing I do, I did enjoy and still do is walking in and seeing all the green, all the grass.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I like.
Unfortunately, and all the canvas covering over the outfield seats, that's an unfortunate part. One imagines that it would have taken a World Series to get people sitting up in those seats.
Yes, if when that happens, they need to remove those if it happens. Yes.
Yep.
Good point. I read in an article that they had a sellout at 36,000. I was telling someone with the paper that's not a sellout, but then they told me about the tarp.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, they've tarped Mount Davis to lower the capacity. Heather, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. You told me a story about how when you were a little girl and you were an only child and you made friends with Charlie O, the mule. Maybe you could tell people that story. It's just really sweet. And fun.
Interesting too. When we were going to get the mule, Dad started showing me movies of Francis the Talking Mule to get me on board with it, as if they needed my permission. But yes, Dad was good friends with the man who owned the stables, Benjamin Stables in Kansas City. So after school, Dad would take me out. Howard gave me my own horse, pony / and Charlie O was in one of his stalls was next to my horse, and I would take carrots and sugar cubes and talk to him. And oh God, his tail would swish. It was as if he understood what I was saying. And his hoofs, by the way, did anyone notice his hoofs were painted black in Kansas City, then white in Oakland?
Mm.
Oh, I never knew that. I never knew that.
Yeah. Who notices that? But yes, so he was a good sport about that. And the Kansas City Chiefs had a mascot named Warpaint, and he had his own teepee.
Oh.
I always thought every mascot was a real animal.
There's not a lot of real animals anymore. You got Orbit in Houston, you got Wally in Boston.
Were we the only one with a real animal, the only Major League Baseball team?
You might have been the only ball club with an actual animal.
Well, the yard goats in Hartford have one, but they're minor.
True, the AA yard goats in Hartford do have actual goats that hang out on the concourse. You could pet them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know of any other ball club that actually has, I don't know, a zebra on the concourse saying, "Come on and pet the mascot."
I like the sound of that.
Chicken. The San Diego chicken doesn't count.
I'll take it.
The
I love San Diego chicken.
The St. Paul Saints have a pig.
The sheep.
What's that, Patricia?
The St. Paul Saints have a pig.
They do?
It comes out. Does it travel with them or come out?
Well, I think it's only for home games. It brings the balls out in like a little pig snout bag.
You got a couple of teams that have bat dogs. Those are fun.
Yeah.
Oh, the article, by the way, about this first season in Kansas City is real funny about Harvey coming out of the ground and surprising the players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Harvey was a rabbit with a basket of balls that the umpire would push a button on the ground, and out would pop Harvey. Here's some baseballs. And who was the story? I remember reading a story about one player that just about jumped out of his shoes.
I've heard that. Heart
And I
attack.
can't think of who it is.
Harvey had flashing red eyes, and they would play this scary organ music before he started to rise.
Now, did Charlie also have a button on the ground that blew dirt off home plate. Do I recall that story correctly?
Blow hard. I've heard of that. I wasn't interested in that, but I know we had something like that in Kansas City. It was supposed to help things speed up, but I don't think it did. Yeah, it was called Little Blowhard.
Okay. Okay.
Nancy, about the colors, I wanted to mention, didn't you mention to me that Charlie had sheep in the outfield
Oh, yes.
that he colored different colors? I don't remember that at all, but that's so bizarre.
I have a picture of Dad in a trench coat with Pat Friday looking at white sheep, obviously looking for sheep to dye colors. And it looks like they're wondering what they're doing out there. But yes, I remember how pretty that was with the dyed sheep. We hired a man to wear a colorful striped robe and hold a staff and have a beard. Very biblical. We
Sounds
had
like Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Exactly. We had caged monkeys who were all named after Charlie's uncles.
Oh my God.
Monkey's uncle.
Yep.
Bingo.
And then Harvey, the Jimmy Stewart movie. And then someone told me that some of the employees gave the monkeys greenies. I don't know what those are.
Read ball 4.
Yes, that's in both four, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Well,
That's Glenn's right. Glenn, go ahead.
Well, no, it's just knowing what greenies are is what I've gotten from ball 4. I know that
Oh, okay. Okay.
greenies
I
were
thought
the
it was-
amphetamines that were in a bowl on the food table in the clubhouse at Yankee Stadium.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That must be what Dad and Charlie referred to as dope. Everything was dope. If it was bad for you, it was dope.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
What else for Nancy? What other questions do we have for Nancy this evening?
I'm still shocked by that.
It was the 70s.
Yes, I mean, I'm always learning about these things.
See? See, and you didn't think you were going to learn anything joining SABR. Come on now.
Oh my gosh.
Come on now.
Oh, I am. Yes. Oh. Wow.
Now,
What
you have alluded to me. Well, I'm going to move us into this before we go. You've alluded to me. You've got more. There's a part 2 coming.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. That keeps growing and growing. And I'm always going, I didn't know this. Yes, part 2. Because it's like I mentioned, for the late 70s, we were around and we were building. It's just that nothing's mentioned. I think it's because we didn't talk to the press. You don't talk to the press. So all that could happen was people were guessing about us. And they would call the players. One thing we didn't do, we allowed players to talk to the press. We didn't say they could not. Teams do that now. Our players are not allowed to talk to the press without the team knowing what's going to be asked. Wow, I'm surprised we did that, but I think that's how things got out. Was a reporter would call a player and ask, how do you feel today? Are you angry at Finley? You know, stuff like that.
Any idea when you are going to complete that book?
I'm going into 1983. And I'm still trying to figure out how to word some things. So I might skip right now and go up to the late 80s and talk about some things like Dad was asked to stay as part-time consultant, and I have something they actually had the All-Star game in Oakland in 1987 at a really nice hotel across from the Coliseum. You just can't imagine that now. And then Charlie invited me to St. Patrick's Day at the White House in 82. And I couldn't go. I was just too busy, too swamped. I remember feeling bad. I visited his place because Dad asked me to. He wanted Dad to move in with him. in LaPorte, Chicago.
Mhm.
And he was very high energy, high maintenance. I think Dad was just higher. Dad wanted to be with his grandkids. Yeah. So
When do
it
you
was.
When do you think you're going to be able to publish? Any ideas?
I have right now I'm debating on whether I should just have everything in a rough manuscript or maybe hold some of it back.
Third book. Ooh.
Well, no, it would be out just right when it's going to press.
Okay.
Only, yes, because there are some things in there that I might not want leaked. I know things leak, and when I sent my other book out, that was fine because I have my sources, proof. One thing I wanted to mention was our team doctor, the general doctor, Hudson. Has anyone heard of the Bohemian Club?
No.
Probably best, but the doctor was a member of that and would take Dad to the Bohemian Club with him. I remember Dad came home one night and said Prince Charles was there. And there was nothing in the paper about a visit. And Dad just said he's much shorter than he thought, like 5'3", 5'4". Prince Charles. That tells you something about the Bohemian Club. It's up in the North Bay. And Charlie never did any of that stuff. That was a thing. I think there were times Dad enjoyed Charlie being 2,000 or 3,000 miles away. And then we always had Miss America. Every year we had the current Miss America. And growing up, I always thought that was a sport because Dad would say, let's watch Miss America together and have popcorn. And I noticed the women in my family would never be excited about it. And then as I got older, one of my sources, Crosby Kemper in Kansas City, was talking about how he had lunch with a Miss America. His dad was good friends with Charlie and how exciting that was. And he verified a lot for me, but I remember always being next to a Miss America at events. And that they just really enjoyed that contest for some reason. So I wanted to ask, does anyone want to see the P&L I have for our 1961 season? Or make that another?
I think we'll make that another appearance. We'll do that again.
I'd like to know what others think about what we paid for, advertising and all that.
I think that'd be an interesting discussion at some point.
I haven't put that out. Okay.
All right. The book is called Finley Ball: How Two Baseball Outsiders Turned the Oakland A's into a Dynasty and Changed the Game Forever. It's a great book. Local bookstore, which there it is. There it is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that out there, Glenn. I appreciate that. The book's available at most major bookstores. Go to your local small bookstore. Have them order it for you. It's the
I don't
way
go
to
in.
go.
I don't want to see my own book.
Keep local bookstores going. But now, next week, 7 o'clock, same bad time, same bad channel, we will have Porky Gaskell with us this evening. He's going to give us a fantastic presentation called The Making of a 19th Century Baseball. It's sure to be a really great presentation.
A real baseball?
Quite unique. Yes, a real 19th century baseball. I actually have one I'll have to bring out. Nancy, you're welcome to join next week, but we're going to get everybody out of here. We're going to see everybody next week at 7 o'clock. I want to thank Nancy Finley. I'm going to say again, baseball royalty. She doesn't like it, but that's okay. A member of the family that brought the Oakland A's to the promised land 3 times in the 70s. Nancy, thank you very much for coming.
SABR member, yes.
And a SABR member too, doggone it. That's my fault. I'll admit it. That's my fault.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank
Let's
you,
get
Nancy.
everybody out
Thank
here.
you,
Everybody have
Bruce.
a great night. Thank you, Nancy. We'll see you again next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you,
All right,
Nancy.
everybody. Thank you.
Good night, Gus.
And good night to Gus.